What if the most dangerous man in the room was the one nobody noticed? The one carrying secrets, scars, and a story worth millions. Welcome to Seatown Slim Television.
The warmth from the fireplace danced across Sky's Manhattan loft as I sat quietly staring into the flames. New Year's Eve had come and gone, but the feeling from the night before still lingered in the air. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. Real peace. The kind of peace a man rarely finds after years of chaos, prison walls, betrayal, and endless struggles. Sky walked into the living room carrying 2 glasses of wine. She handed me one before curling up beside me on the oversized couch. Neither of us spoke right away. We didn't have to. Sometimes silence says more than words ever could. Sky rested her head against my shoulder as we watched the fire crackle. "You know," she said softly, "last night was the happiest I've been in years." I looked down at her. "Really?" She nodded. "I spent so much of my life surrounded by people, yet somehow I was always alone." I wrapped my arm around her. "You're not alone anymore." Sky looked up at me, her beautiful gray eyes filled with emotion. "I know." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The only sounds in the room were the crackling fireplace and the soft jazz music playing in the background. Finally, Sky broke the silence. "Romy?" "Yeah, Ma." "Promise me something." "What?" "Promise me that no matter what happens, you'll always be honest with me." I could hear the vulnerability in her voice. I gently lifted her chin so she could look me in the eyes. "I promise." She studied my face as if searching for something. Whatever she found seemed to put her at ease. A small smile slowly spread across her lips. "You have no idea how badly I needed to hear that." I kissed her forehead. "Everybody needs somebody they can trust, Sky." She wrapped her arms around me. "And I trust you." Those words hit me harder than she probably realized, because trust wasn't something Sky gave freely. Not after everything she had been through. As midnight slowly faded into morning, we remained wrapped in each other's arms, neither of us wanting the moment to end. Neither of us realized that our lives were about to become far more complicated. But for that one night, none of that mattered. For that one night, it was just Jerome and Sky. And for both of us, that was enough. Later that evening, Sky and I sat together in front of the fireplace. The city lights illuminated the massive windows surrounding her Manhattan loft, creating a breathtaking view of the skyline. But Sky wasn't admiring the view. She seemed distant, lost in thought. "What's on your mind?" I asked. She remained quiet for several seconds. Finally, she took a deep breath. "There's something I need to tell you." The seriousness in her voice immediately got my attention. "What is it?" Sky stared into the fire. "I haven't been completely honest with you about Julius." I didn't say anything. I simply listened. "Julius has been a part of my life for a very long time," she continued quietly. "Too long." "How long?" She looked down. "Since I was a little girl." I frowned. "What do you mean?" Sky slowly began telling me about her past, about her mother, about growing up around people she never truly trusted, about the influence Julius White had managed to gain over her family. As she spoke, I could hear the pain in her voice. Years of pain, years of fear, years of unresolved hurt. Then she said something that stopped me cold. "The night my mother died," she whispered, fighting back tears, "Julius was there." I sat forward. "What?" Sky nodded. "He wasn't alone either." I could see her struggling. "Young Gambino was there too." The room suddenly felt smaller, colder. "Sky, are you saying—" "I don't know what happened, Romy," she interrupted. "Not completely." Tears began rolling down her face. "I've tried for years to remember everything, but some parts are still missing." I immediately pulled her into my arms. "It's okay." "No, it's not," she cried softly. "Nothing about it is okay." I held her tighter. "You don't have to go through this alone anymore." Sky looked up at me. "You don't understand. Julius has controlled so much of my life. Even now, he still thinks he owns me." "He doesn't own you." She searched my face. "You don't know Julius." "No," I said honestly. "But I know you." I gently wiped away her tears. "And I know this. Whatever happened in your past, Whatever you're facing now, you're not facing it by yourself anymore. For several moments, Sky simply stared at me, almost as if she couldn't believe someone had finally said those words. Then she quietly whispered, "Thank you." And in that moment, I realized something. Whatever history existed between Sky and Julius White ran much deeper than jealousy, much deeper than obsession. There were secrets buried in Sky's past, secrets somebody had desperately tried to keep hidden, and sooner or later, those secrets were going to come to light. The next morning, I woke up with Sky lying peacefully beside me. For a few moments, I simply watched her sleep. After everything she had shared with me the night before, I knew our relationship had changed. We weren't just dating anymore. We had become something much deeper, something real. Sky slowly opened her eyes and smiled. "Good morning, Romy." "Morning, beautiful." She stretched before resting her head against my chest. "You have to leave today, don't you?" I nodded reluctantly. "Yeah, I promised Lil J Dub I'd spend some time with him." A small smile crossed her face. "You're a good father." "I try to be." Sky looked up at me. "No, you don't try. You are." I kissed her forehead. "That means a lot coming from you." Neither of us wanted to say goodbye, but responsibilities called. A few hours later, after sharing breakfast together, Sky walked me downstairs. Before I climbed into the waiting vehicle, she grabbed my hand. "Be careful," I smiled. "You too." "I mean it, Romy." "So do I." I pulled her close and kissed her. "I'll call you as soon as I land." "I'll be waiting." As the vehicle pulled away from Sky's Manhattan loft, I looked back one last time. She was still standing there watching me leave, and for reasons I couldn't explain, I suddenly had a strange feeling in the pit of my stomach, like trouble was coming. A few hours later, I landed in Cleveland and headed straight to see my son. Nothing in the world meant more to me than Lil J Dub. No amount of money, no amount of fame, no amount of success. Being his father would always come first. And for the rest of the day, that's exactly who I intended to be. Just Dad. Completely unaware that events were already unfolding elsewhere that would soon threaten everything we had worked so hard to build. Cassandra stood in the kitchen washing dishes when Erica suddenly burst through the front door. "Girl, turn on the television," Erica said excitedly. Cassandra looked over her shoulder. "What are you talking about?" "Just turn it on." Confused, Cassandra grabbed the remote and switched on the television. Almost immediately, she froze. There on the screen was Jerome, and beside him was Sky Divine. The headline across the entertainment program read, "Best-selling author Jerome Williams and superstar." Sky Divine spotted together in New York. Pictures from New Year's Eve flashed across the screen. Jerome and Sky leaving the House of Blues. Jerome opening Sky's car door. The two of them walking hand in hand. Another photo showed them embracing outside Sky's Manhattan loft. Cassandra felt her stomach tighten. Erica quietly sat beside her. Neither woman spoke. For several moments, Cassandra simply stared at the television. "He looks happy," Erica finally said. Cassandra nodded slowly. "He does." There was pain in her voice. Real pain. Because for the first time, everything had become real. Jerome had moved on. The man she had spent years with. The father of her child, the man who had loved her through everything, was now building a life with another woman. Cassandra looked away from the television. "I always thought we'd find our way back to each other," she said softly. Erica looked at her. "Maybe you waited too long." Tears began filling Cassandra's eyes. "I never thought I'd lose him." "But you did," Erica said gently. Cassandra lowered her head. Deep down, she knew Erica was right. She had spent years waiting for Jerome to become the man she wanted him to be. The problem was, while she was waiting, Jerome had become that man, and now he belonged to someone else. A single tear rolled down Cassandra's cheek as another picture of Jerome and Sky appeared on the screen. For the first time since Jerome had come home from prison, Cassandra finally allowed herself to admit the truth. She still loved him, and she might have lost him forever. Tank sat across from Tito inside a private room overlooking Biscayne Bay. Business had concluded hours earlier, but neither man seemed in a hurry to leave. Over the years, the two men had developed more than a working relationship. There was respect, loyalty, and an understanding that in their world, trust was a rare commodity. Tito poured himself another drink before looking across the table at Tank. "How's Jerome?" he asked. Tank smiled. "Good. Better than good, actually. The books are doing numbers, the businesses are growing, and now he's talking movie deals." Tito nodded approvingly. "I always respected Jerome." Tank wasn't surprised. Most people did. Jerome had managed to do something very few men ever accomplished. He had reinvented himself. Completely. "He earned everything he got," Tank said proudly. "Exactly," Tito replied, "which is why I don't understand you." Tank looked up. "What's that supposed to mean?" Tito leaned back in his chair. "Jerome built a legitimate empire. Books, real estate, publishing, business. The man has a chance to leave all of this behind forever." Tank didn't say anything, because he already knew where this conversation was headed. Tito continued. "So why are you still taking chances?" Tank sighed. "It ain't that simple." "No," Tito said. "It's very simple." Tank remained silent. "Jerome would never knowingly jeopardize everything he worked for," Tito said. "Not after everything you two went through." The words hit Tank hard, because deep down, he knew Tito was right. Everything Jerome had built was legitimate. Everything. And if Jerome ever discovered the risks Tank had been taking behind the scenes, there was no telling how he would react. "He can't know," Tank said quietly. Tito studied his friend. "No, my friend," Tito corrected him. "Eventually he will know." For several moments neither man spoke. Tank stared out across the water. The guilt had been eating at him for months. Jerome trusted him with everything. Their friendship, their company, their future. And Tank wasn't sure how much longer he could keep the truth hidden. Finally, the meeting came to an end. The two men embraced before going their separate ways. As Tank walked toward his rental vehicle, he pulled out his phone and called Capone. Capone answered on the second ring. "What's up?" Capone asked. "I'm heading back to Cleveland," Tank said. "You riding with me?" There was a brief pause. "Nah," Capone replied. "I'm gonna ride back with the bus." Tank frowned. "You sure?" "Yeah, I'll be all right. I'll see you when I get back." Tank hesitated. Something didn't sit right with him, but Capone was grown. "You be safe then," Tank said. "You too." After hanging up, Tank climbed into his rental and headed toward the airport. As he drove, Tito's words continued replaying in his mind. "Protect Jerome." Tank couldn't shake the feeling that something bad was coming. He just didn't know how bad, or that in a matter of minutes he would see something on the interstate that would change everything. Tank couldn't believe what he was seeing. As he made his way toward the airport, traffic on the interstate suddenly slowed to a crawl. Up ahead, flashing lights illuminated the highway. At first, Tank didn't think much of it, until he saw the tour bus. Capone's tour bus. "Aw, man," Tank said quietly. His heart immediately sank. Several police vehicles surrounded the bus. Emergency lights reflected off the side of the black luxury coach as officers moved back and forth around it. Tank quickly pulled his rental vehicle onto the shoulder a safe distance away. "No," he whispered. "Please don't let this be what I think it is." He immediately grabbed his phone and called Capone. No answer. He called again. Still no answer. Now Tank was worried. From where he sat, he could see officers speaking with the driver and several members of Capone's entourage. Then he noticed something else. A K-9 unit. "Damn," Tank muttered. The longer he watched, the worse the situation appeared to become. Suddenly, several officers emerged from the bus. Among them was Capone, in handcuffs. Tank closed his eyes. "Please tell me this ain't happening." Moments later, his phone rang. One of Capone's associates. Tank answered immediately. "What's going on?" "It's bad," the voice said frantically. "How bad?" "There was contraband on the bus. Everybody's being detained while they sort everything out." Tank's stomach dropped. Years. Years of hard work. Years of sacrifice. Years of building big stacks alongside Jerome. Everything suddenly felt vulnerable, because Tank understood something that most people didn't. Success could take years to build, but one bad decision could destroy everything overnight. As traffic slowly began moving again, Tank remained parked on the side of the road, staring, thinking, praying. Because for the first time since leaving prison, Tank genuinely feared that everything he and Jerome had worked so hard to build was in danger, And if Capone went down, they all might go down with him. Tank sat in his rental vehicle long after the police activity had ended. His mind was racing. He couldn't stop thinking about Jerome, everything they had built together, everything they had sacrificed for. And now, because of one bad decision, all of it could come crashing down. Tank had spent years helping Jerome build Big Stacks from the ground up. He had watched Jerome transform from an inmate with a dream into a best-selling author, businessman, and respected entrepreneur. Jerome had earned every bit of his success, every single bit of it. And the thought of being responsible for taking that away weighed heavily on Tank's conscience. He immediately called Capone's phone again, straight to voicemail. "Damn," Tank whispered. He leaned back in his seat and closed his eyes. Tito's words echoed through his mind. Protect Jerome. Tank had always protected Jerome. At least that's what he told himself. But for the first time since they'd left prison, he wasn't so sure. He knew one thing for certain. If Jerome ever found out about the risks Tank had been taking behind the scenes, their friendship might never recover. The thought alone made Tank sick to his stomach. Because Jerome wasn't just his business partner. Jerome was his brother, family. And family wasn't supposed to put family in jeopardy. After sitting on the side of the interstate for nearly 20 minutes, Tank finally started the vehicle. There was nothing he could do for Capone now. All he could do was pray. Pray that Capone would somehow beat the situation. Pray that Jerome never found out. And pray that Big Stacks survived what was coming. Because deep down, Tank knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. And somewhere in New York, completely unaware of the storm brewing around him, Jerome Williams was falling deeper in love with Sky Divine. Unaware that both his personal life and business empire were about to be tested in ways he never could have imagined. I spent the entire day with my son. Movies, Benahanas, Dave and Buster's, just father and son time. By the end of the night, Lil J Dub was exhausted. The little man had fallen asleep before we even made it home. I had to carry him from the range to Cassandra's house because he was out cold. Seeing him sleeping peacefully in my arms reminded me that no matter how successful I became, no matter how many books I sold or businesses I owned, being his father would always be my greatest accomplishment. After leaving Cassandra's, I headed straight to Burke Lakefront Airport and hopped on the G4. By the time I landed in Manhattan, it was a little after 2 in the morning. I finally made it to Sky's loft around 2:30. Let's just say neither one of us got much sleep. By the time we finally drifted off, the sun was already beginning to rise above Manhattan's skyline. We slept away most of the day. When I finally opened my eyes, I reached over, expecting to feel Sky beside me. Nothing. I sat up. "Sky!" I called out. No answer. I checked the bedroom, then the living room. Still nothing. Figuring she had stepped out for a while, I grabbed my BlackBerry and checked for missed calls, emails, and voice messages. Oddly enough, there were no missed calls. That was strange. Tank and Capone usually call before their feet even touch the floor in the morning. I did have 2 voice messages, though. The first one was from Gia. "Rome, this executive from Hollywood called. He says he's interested in turning bullets and bloodshed into a movie. I got all his information waiting for you at the office. Call me." I nearly fell off the bed. "Yes!" I yelled, kicking my feet like a little kid on Christmas morning. Hollywood. Hollywood wanted to turn one of my books into a movie? I couldn't stop smiling. Everything I'd worked for, everything I'd sacrificed, it was finally paying off. Still grinning from ear to ear, I played my second message. "Hi, Jerome. It's me, Sandy. Before you start worrying, nothing's wrong with your son. I'm calling on my behalf." The smile slowly disappeared from my face. "Baby, I'm sorry. I can't do this anymore. Sit back and watch you be happy while I'm not the reason for it. I'll leave young money. All you have to do is say the word." I hit delete before she could finish. I tossed the BlackBerry on the bed. "You were supposed to wait for me too," I said aloud. I shook my head. "Cass, you had microwave syndrome. You wanted something quick, something easy. Meanwhile, I was in the oven, baking slow." I smiled to myself. Now the meal is finished, and it's fit for a king. With thoughts of movie deals dancing in my head, I headed for the shower. An old Blackstreet song found its way into my mind as the hot water hit my skin. Now I ain't saying I could sing professionally, but in the shower? Man, I was a superstar. I was halfway through the second verse when the shower door suddenly flew open. Boy, I didn't know you could sing. I nearly jumped out of my skin. Girl, I yelled, dropping both the soap and washcloth. Sky stood there laughing so hard tears were streaming down her face. Oh, this funny to you, huh? She saw the look on my face and immediately took a step backward. Romy, don't even think about it. Too late. I reached out, grabbed her around the waist and pulled her into the shower with me. Romy, she squealed, laughing as water soaked her clothes. I wrapped my arms around her and kissed her forehead. You scared me half to death. She looked up at me and smiled. Good. That's what you get for keeping all that talent hidden. I looked into her beautiful gray eyes and smiled. Baby, you haven't seen all my talents yet. She laughed and playfully pushed me. The two of us stood there laughing, holding each other beneath the warm water. For a few brief moments, the world outside didn't exist. It was just me and Sky, and honestly, that's exactly how I liked it. The laughter slowly faded as Sky and I stood beneath the warm water, wrapped up in one another. I kissed her softly. She kissed me back. What had started as playful teasing quickly turned into something deeper, something neither one of us wanted to let go of. I gently brushed a wet strand of hair away from her face. You know, I said, smiling, I could get used to waking up like this every day. Sky smiled. Careful, Romy. You keep talking like that, and I might start believing you. I ain't talking, I'm serious. She stared into my eyes for a moment. I could see it. The love, the fear, the uncertainty. After everything she'd been through, trusting somebody with her heart still didn't come easy. I pulled her closer. You know I'm not going anywhere, right? Sky rested her head against my chest. I know, she said softly. At least I'm trying to believe it. Before I could respond, she suddenly stiffened. Romy, we gotta stop. I looked down at her. Why? Tashanti is on her way over. I immediately stopped. Melly too? Yes, she laughed. Melly too. I looked toward the bathroom door. Well, we still got a little time. Sky just stood there staring at me. Then she burst out laughing. Boy, you are something else. What? I asked innocently. She shook her head. I swear, I don't know what I'm going to do with you. I smiled. You could start by hurrying up before your friends get here. Sky playfully slapped my chest. Romy! The next few moments belonged only to us. No cameras, no fame, no drama. Just two people in love, stealing a few extra moments together before the real world came crashing back in. Nearly an hour later, there was a knock at the door. Sky looked at me and smiled. That'll be them. A few minutes later, Tashanti and Melly stood outside the loft waiting for someone to answer. When Sky finally opened the door, Tashanti immediately noticed the glow on her friend's face, and judging by Sky's slightly disheveled appearance, she knew exactly what had been going on. Girl, you are a mess, Tashanti whispered with a knowing smile. Sky couldn't help but laugh. Give us a minute. Melly, completely oblivious, walked inside. What's up, Sky? Hey, Melly, Sky said, still smiling. A short while later, the four of us headed out for dinner at Mr. Chow's. None of us knew it at the time. But before the night was over, everything was going to change. Mr. Chow's was alive. It seemed like every celebrity in Hollywood, sports, and music had decided to have dinner there that night. As we were escorted to our table, I couldn't help but look around. Denzel Washington and his wife sat several tables away. Derek Jeter was there with a beautiful woman on his arm. Tom Cruise and his wife Kate were laughing with Will and Jada Smith. I even spotted Kate Hudson and Kimberly Locke. I leaned over toward Sky. You couldn't have told me a year ago that I'd be sitting in Mr. Chow's having dinner with Tashanti and Melly. Sky smiled and squeezed my hand underneath the table. A lot can happen in a year. Melly laughed. When my girl told me we were meeting Sky's man, I ain't gonna lie, I was looking forward to this. I nodded. Yeah? Yeah, he said. You know Sky's family to us. She's a good friend, so I hope your intentions are sincere. The table grew quiet. Tashanti immediately looked at Melly. Baby. What? Melly said, raising his hands. I'm just being honest. I smiled. No disrespect taken. Sky is my woman, and running game ain't how I'm built. Melly studied me for a moment. Finally, he nodded. I can respect that. You don't have to worry, Sky said, coming to my defense. Jerome is good to me. A comfortable silence settled over the table. Then Melly spoke again. So, Dirty, I read a couple of your books. I raised an eyebrow. Oh yeah, they hot, he said. Matter of fact, when I was reading them, I kept thinking these stories would make good movies. I laughed. It's funny you say that. Everybody looked at me. My secretary called me this morning. Some Hollywood producer is interested in turning bullets and bloodshed into a movie. For real? Sky asked excitedly. I nodded. For real? Baby, that's huge, she exclaimed, throwing her arms around me. Melly smiled. Congratulations, my man. That's major. Appreciate it. Melly leaned back in his chair. You know, if that deal goes through, Tha Lu Entertainment and Big Stacks should do a joint venture on the soundtrack. I thought about it for a moment. You know what? That actually sounds like a hell of an idea. Say less, Melly replied. We'll make it happen. Oh, and I'll sing on the soundtrack, Sky said enthusiastically. We all laughed. If y'all excuse me for a minute, Melly said, standing up from the table. I'm about to hit the restroom. As Melly walked away, none of us noticed the danger entering the restaurant. Not until Tashanti's expression changed. Sky, she said quietly. Isn't that Julius's boy, young Gambino? Sky and I turned toward the entrance. A hostess was leading young Gambino, his girlfriend, and an enormous bodyguard through the restaurant. The moment young Gambino saw us, he stopped, and the look on his face told me everything I needed to know. Trouble had just walked through the door. Young Gambino slowly approached our table, his girlfriend and massive bodyguard trailing a few steps behind him. That smug grin plastered across his face immediately rubbed me the wrong way. What's up, Sky? He asked. Long time no see. Before Sky could respond, Tashanti spoke up. Is that all you see sitting here? Young Gambino never took his eyes off Sky. That's all I'm speaking to. Sky folded her arms. What do you want? It ain't what I want, young Gambino replied. It's what Julius wants. I noticed Sky tense up instantly. That was all I needed to see. Look, I said calmly, we're eating right now. You can run your errand for Julius another time. Young Gambino slowly turned his attention toward me. What did you say? You heard me, I replied, refusing to break eye contact. Whatever message Julius got for Sky can wait. Young Gambino leaned across the table. Who the fuck you think you talking to, bitch-ass nigga? I leaned forward, the same fuck nigga standing in front of me. The entire table went silent. Then young Gambino did something so disrespectful, so disgusting, that for a split second I couldn't believe it. He spit directly in my face. Time stopped. I slowly wiped my face, looked down at my hand, then looked back at him. At that moment, nothing else inside Mr. Chow's existed. Not Sky, not Tashanti, not the celebrities, not the customers. Just me and him. I exploded from my seat. I grabbed young Gambino by his shirt and yanked him across the table, sending plates, glasses, and silverware crashing to the floor. The first punch landed flush. The second snapped his head back. The third sent him stumbling. Chaos erupted. Women screamed. People scattered. Chairs overturned. Food and drinks crashed onto the floor. Young Gambino tried to recover, but rage had completely taken over. Years of pain, prison, and struggle came pouring out in those few seconds. Then everything changed. A massive hand grabbed me from behind. Young Gambino's bodyguard. I spun and threw everything I had into a punch. The only thing I accomplished was knocking his sunglasses off. The giant smiled. That smile told me everything. Before I could react, he lifted me completely off my feet and slammed me through a nearby table. Wood exploded on impact. The wind rushed from my lungs. Seeing me down, young Gambino rushed toward me looking to capitalize. But before he could, a chair shattered across the bodyguard's back. Melly. The giant collapsed face first to the floor, out cold. Melly stepped between me and young Gambino. This ain't got shit to do with you, young Gambino roared. It does now, Melly said. He came here with me. Where I'm from, we don't roll like that. A witness hurried over. I saw what happened, he said. You did what you had to do, but somebody called the police. You all need to leave, now. Sky, Tashanti, and Melly helped me to my feet and rushed me outside. Minutes later, we were speeding away from Mr. Chow's in a cab. As I looked back through the rear window, young Gambino stood outside the restaurant staring in our direction. Something told me this wasn't over, not even close. The ride back to Sky's loft was quiet, too quiet. Sky sat pressed against me in the back of the cab while Tashanti and Melly occupied the opposite seat. Nobody knew exactly what to say. The adrenaline from the fight had worn off. Now all that remained was pain. I leaned my head back against the seat and closed my eyes. "Romy," Sky said softly. "I'm good." "No, you're not." I opened my eyes and looked at her. Concern was written all over her face. "I've been through worse," I said, forcing a smile. Sky wasn't buying it. Neither was Melly. "You definitely got heart," Melly said. "Most people would have folded after getting blindsided by a dude that size." I laughed, then immediately regretted it. My ribs felt like somebody had taken a baseball bat to them. "I appreciate you stepping in," I told him. Melly nodded. "No problem, I couldn't just stand there and watch." Tashanti looked over at Sky. "This whole thing with Julius has gone too far." Sky stared out the window. "I know." "No," Tashanti continued. "I mean it. This man has been controlling your life for years. Enough is enough." Sky didn't answer. She didn't have to. The pain on her face said everything. When we finally arrived at the loft, Sky helped me upstairs. Once inside, she immediately grabbed the first aid kit. "Sit down," she ordered. I smiled. "Yes, ma'am." Sky carefully cleaned the cut above my eye. Every now and then, she'd stop and look at me as if she were blaming herself. "Stop," I said. "What?" "Whatever you're thinking, stop." Tears filled her eyes. "If it wasn't for me," I gently grabbed her hand. "If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have met the best thing that's ever happened to me." "Romy!" "I'm serious." I looked directly into her eyes. "Whatever problems Julius has, they're his problems. You didn't ask for this." Sky wrapped her arms around me and held me tightly. For a long moment, neither of us said a word. Finally, she whispered, "I'm scared." I kissed her forehead. "You don't have to be." She looked up. "Why?" "Because you're not in this by yourself anymore." At that moment, my phone began ringing. I looked at the screen. Tank. Something told me this conversation was about to change everything. I looked down at my phone. Tank. I already knew this wasn't going to be a pleasant conversation. "Yeah," I answered. "What the hell happened?" Tank barked. I pulled the phone away from my ear and looked at it. "Damn, hello to you too." "Don't play with me, Rome. I heard somebody put hands on you." I looked over at Sky. She immediately looked away. "I'm good," I said. "Good?" Tank snapped. "Man, Gia said you got beat up." I laughed, then instantly regretted it as pain shot through my ribs. "Nah, it wasn't like that." "Then tell me what happened," I sighed. "It's a long story. I ain't got nothing but time." I looked over at Sky again. She gave me a slight nod. It was Julius White's people. The line went silent. "What?" "His right-hand man, young Gambino." "And why the hell was Julius White's people approaching you?" I hesitated. "Because of Sky." This time the silence lasted longer. When Tank finally spoke, his voice was calm. Too calm. "Explain." So I did. I told him about Sky's past, about Julius, about the control he had over her life, about young Gambino approaching our table. I left nothing out. When I finished, Tank asked one question. "He put his hands on you?" Before I could answer, Sky spoke up. "Tank, young Gambino spit on Romy." "What?" Tank exploded. "He spit on him," Sky repeated. For several seconds, all I heard was breathing on the other end. Heavy breathing. Then Tank spoke. "That clown spit on my boy?" "Tank, calm down," I said. "No, you calm down." I shook my head. "Tank." "Nah, Rome. Somebody spits on you, they spit on me. Somebody puts hands on you, they put hands on me." Despite everything, I smiled. That's who Tank was, loyal to a fault. "Where you at?" Tank asked. "At Sky's loft." "I'm on my way." "You don't have to do that." "Yeah, I do." "Tank, listen to me. You're my brother. I don't care about the books, the businesses, none of that. Somebody disrespected you. That means they disrespected me. I knew arguing with Tank was pointless. Once his mind was made up, that was it. How long? Asked. In a few hours. Before hanging up, Tank said one last thing. Put Sky on the phone. I handed Sky the BlackBerry. Hello? Sky, I need answers when I get there. You'll get them. And if this Julius White situation got my boy caught up in something bigger than what he knows, we're going to have a problem. Sky closed her eyes. I understand. Good. Tank hung up. Sky slowly lowered the phone. What did he say? I asked. She looked at me. He loves you, I smiled. Yeah. That much I already knew. Tank sat alone inside Whitmore's nursing, another shot of Grey Goose. The situation with Capone had him stressed beyond belief. 100 bricks, Capone in custody, federal charges looming, and Jerome still had no idea any of it had happened. Tank tossed back another shot. Even Tito had called from Miami wanting answers, wanting to know what Tank planned to do, wanting to know if Capone could keep his mouth shut. Truth be told, Tank didn't know the answer to either question. The only thing he knew for certain was that the walls were closing in. There was one possible solution. One. A move that could potentially protect both him and Tito. But if he made that move, he'd belong to Tito. The thought alone made Tank sick. He had escaped prison once. The thought of spending the rest of his life behind bars, or indebted to another man, was unacceptable. Just as he finished another shot, his phone rang. Gia. Yeah, Tank answered. Did you talk to Sky? Gia asked. Yeah, I talked to her. So you're already on top of it. I'm about to leave now. There was a brief pause. You okay? Gia asked. Tank laughed bitterly. Do I sound okay? No. Then there's your answer. Tank hung up before she could say anything else. He sat there quietly for a moment, replaying everything Sky had told him. Young Gambino, Julius White, the spit, the fight, the bodyguard, Melly stepping in. Tank's blood began boiling all over again. You spit on my boy? He said aloud. He thought back to a recent conversation he'd had with Jerome. See what you can find out about Julius White. Also see what you can dig up on Yolanda Devine. At the time, Tank hadn't given it much thought. Now he had questions of his own. A lot of questions. His phone rang again. Tito. You hear about Jerome? Tito asked. Yeah, Tank replied. As a matter of fact, I'm on my way to New York right now. If you need anything, and I mean anything, you call me. Tank paused. As a matter of fact, I do need your help, but it ain't something I want to discuss over the phone. What is it? I'll explain when I see you. Right now, I need to check on my brother. After hanging up, Tank stormed out of Whitmore's. The liquor, the stress, the fear, the anger. It all mixed together as he climbed behind the wheel of his Bentley GT. The engine roared to life. You want to mess with Rome, Tank muttered as he pulled away. Then mess with me. Despite the books, despite the businesses, despite big stacks. When it all came down to it, Tank loved Jerome like they had come from the same womb. Someone hurting Jerome was the same as hurting him. Bodyguards protected people because they were paid to. Tank protected Jerome because he loved him. And no matter what happened when Jerome eventually learned the truth about Capone and the risks Tank had taken behind his back, Tank was determined to prove one thing. His loyalty to Jerome had always been real. The flight from Cleveland to New York felt longer than usual. Tank spent most of it staring out the window, thinking, trying to make sense of everything. Capone was sitting in a jail cell. The feds were circling. Tito wanted answers. And now Jerome had somehow found himself in the middle of a war with Julius White. Tank rubbed his face. Too much was happening at once. Way too much. As soon as the jet touched down in New York, Tank was on the move. He grabbed his bag, climbed into a waiting car, and headed straight for Sky's loft. The entire ride there, his mind replayed one sentence over and over again. He spit on my boy. Every time he thought about it, his grip tightened. Tank had spent years in prison, years surviving, years watching men lose their lives over less. Where he came from, spitting on a man wasn't disrespect. It was war. By the time he arrived at Sky's building, his anger had evolved into something far more dangerous. Purpose. Sky met him downstairs. The moment she saw Tank's face, she knew he wasn't there for small talk. "Where's Rome?" Tank asked, getting straight to the point. "Upstairs." Tank nodded. Neither of them moved. For several moments, they simply stood there looking at one another. Finally, Tank spoke. "I need to know something." "What? How deep is this thing with Julius White?" Sky looked away. "Deep? That's not good enough." Sky sighed. "It's complicated." Tank shook his head. "No, complicated got my boy spit on and slammed through a table." Sky flinched. Immediately, Tank regretted how harsh it sounded. He took a deep breath. "Look, Sky, Rome means a lot to me." "I know." "No, I don't think you do." Sky looked him directly in the eyes. "I love him, Tank." The words caught him off guard. For the first time since arriving, some of the tension left his body. Tank nodded. "Good." Sky frowned. "Good? Because if you didn't, I'd tell him to leave New York tonight." Sky couldn't help but smile. "You're very protective of him." Tank laughed. "Protective? Nah." He paused. "That's my brother." Sky nodded. "I know." Tank looked toward the elevator. "Well, let's go see him." A few moments later, the elevator doors opened. Jerome was waiting. The moment the two men saw each other, they embraced. Neither one said a word. None were needed. Because some bonds go beyond friendship, some bonds are family. Tank and I embraced for a long moment before finally separating. He stepped back and looked me over from head to toe. "Damn, Rome," he said, shaking his head. "You look like hell." I laughed. "Good to see you too." "Nah, for real. You all right?" "I've been better." Tank looked over at Sky. "You got him patched up?" Sky nodded. "As best as I could." Tank looked back at me. "So talk to me." I knew exactly what he meant. "Let's sit down." The three of us took seats in Sky's living room. Tank wasted no time. "Start from the beginning." I looked over at Sky. She nodded. So I told him everything. About Julius White, about Sky's mother, about young Gambino, about Sky believing that both Julius and young Gambino had been present the night her mother died. Tank listened without interrupting. The more he heard, the darker his expression became. When I finally finished, the room was silent. Tank leaned back on the couch and slowly exhaled. "So let me get this straight," he said. "This dude Julius has been controlling Sky's life for years?" Sky lowered her eyes. "Pretty much." "And now he's mad because you chose Rome?" Sky nodded. Tank looked over at me. "You do realize this ain't over, right?" "I know." "No, Rome. I mean, this is just getting started." "I know that too." Tank stood up and walked over to the massive windows overlooking Manhattan. For several moments, he just stared out into the city. Finally, he spoke. "Did you find out anything on Julius yet?" I shook my head. "Nothing concrete." Tank nodded slowly. "Well, I'm about to start digging." He turned toward Sky. "And I need everything you know." "Everything?" "Everything," Tank repeated. "Friends, enemies, businesses, family. I don't care how small it seems. If it involves Julius White, I want to know about it." Sky looked at me. I simply nodded. Tank wasn't playing. Not anymore. "Because if this man got one of his people bold enough to walk into a restaurant and spit on my brother," Tank continued, "then we need to know exactly who we're dealing with." Sky took a deep breath. "Okay." Tank sat back down. "Good. Because before this is over, I plan on finding out everything there is to know about Julius White." And something in Tank's voice told me he meant every word. The conversation lasted well into the night. Tank sat quietly taking mental notes as Sky filled in the blanks. She told him everything she could remember about Julius White. The businesses, the associates, the properties, the people that seemed to appear whenever Julius wanted something done. Nothing was too small. Nothing was insignificant. Tank listened without interrupting. Occasionally, he'd ask a question. Most of the time, he'd simply nod and store the information away. By the time Sky finished, the room had fallen silent. "That's a lot to process," I finally said. Tank leaned back on the couch. "Not really." Sky looked at him. "What do you mean?" "It means Julius has spent years building an empire. Men like him always leave a trail." "You think you can find something on him?" Sky asked. Tank shrugged. "Everybody got secrets." He looked over at me. Some are just hidden better than others. I knew that look. Tank was already working, already putting pieces together, already planning his next move. "Rome, I need you to do me a favor," Tank said. "What's that?" "Stay close to Sky," I laughed. I wasn't planning on going anywhere. "I'm serious," Tank replied. "Until I know exactly who we're dealing with, neither one of you needs to be moving around alone." Sky shifted uncomfortably. "Tank, Julius isn't stupid. If he wanted to hurt me, he would have done it already." Tank shook his head. "No, men like Julius wait. They plan. They send messages." His words hung in the air. Everybody in the room immediately thought about young Gambino. The message had already been sent. Sky moved closer to me and slipped her hand into mine. Tank noticed. For the first time since arriving in New York, he smiled. "You really love her, don't you?" he asked. I looked over at Sky. "Yeah," I said without hesitation. "I do." Sky squeezed my hand. Tank nodded. "Then whatever happens next, just make sure you're ready for it." "Ready for what?" Tank stood and walked toward the window overlooking Manhattan. Without turning around, he answered, "War." And for some reason, hearing Tank say it out loud sent a chill through the entire room.
Some stories end, but the real ones leave questions unanswered. If this chapter pulled you in, like, subscribe, and share, because the next move changes everything. Until next time, welcome to the world of Seatown Slim Television.